Authenticity is one of the top traits attributed to leaders today. We often hear that word. And how do you lead with authenticity? I'm Linda Katz-Wilner, founder and CEO of Successfully Speaking, and I help leaders and aspiring leaders communicate with confidence, clarity, and credibility. My guest today knows a lot about leadership.
Mhm.
Erin Moran is the executive director of the Dr. Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute, which is anchored at Towson University in Maryland. She has dedicated more than 25 years to developing leaders who create inspiring work environments that enable people to be fulfilled and achieve extraordinary business results. Erin believes we create a better society when people work in healthy environments. Welcome, Erin. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Linda, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Sure. And Erin, how did you evolve into this role as executive director of the Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute? I know you started there in 2021, I think.
Yes, actually, and that is when we officially launched the Leadership Institute, was in September of 21. And so I am the inaugural executive director. And I joined after Dr. Grasmick funded 2 years of strategic research to help us to build out a robust and fairly unique leadership development portfolio.
And why you? How did you get into that role?
As you mentioned, I've been developing leaders for about 25 years now. And I worked for an organization called Great Place to Work. And they partner with Fortune magazine to produce and publish the 100 best companies to work for list. And those companies have extraordinary high levels of trust within their organizations. And you can't have a really great high trust environment without having extraordinary leaders. So I got into leadership development, and then I was the chief culture officer of Union Square Hospitality Group in New York City for approximately 7 years. And in terms of being responsible for the culture, one of the best ways to do that is to invest in developing extraordinary leaders. So that's how my career evolved over time to bring me to this current position.
Now, we talk so much, as I mentioned, about authenticity. Tell us more about what it means to lead with authenticity.
I think it means that we need to truly be self-aware and understand ourselves really, really well, what we are exceptional at doing and where our opportunities for growth and development are. I think it also means being emotionally intelligent and actively listening to people and connecting with people in a meaningful and really thoughtful and individualized approach.
You know, it's interesting, Erin, because I recently saw an article just this week about how the traits of leadership have changed from 2012 to 2022.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, we're seeing authenticity show up, listening showing up.
Mhm.
Why do you think it's changed so much over the past decade?
Ooh, that is a great question. I wasn't familiar that it has changed so much, but I think if I had to guess, I would have to say that I think that the pandemic probably shifted how much of our interactions changed, because as even right now you're seeing my home office in the background,
Mhm.
and so you're seeing me at home, and that started in the pandemic. And so I think we had to just be a lot more authentic with one another in our work relationships, because we were literally in one another's homes
Mhm.
while we were in lockdown. And so I think transitioning back into the workplace, I think people just realized that, oh, you know what? This isn't just a colleague or a coworker. This is a fellow human being. And so I think that that desire to be more deeply connected with people was really sparked by the pandemic, and is something that we currently crave more of.
And that was the answer I was thinking as well when I saw that article, because even across industries, there are professional speakers who are now saying now they show up as a keynote speaker and they're wearing sneakers because sneakers are more comfortable.
Right.
And that doesn't change who we are. Or I was talking to bankers and they're saying we don't always have to wear the same clothes that was expected of us years ago.
Right.
We
Right.
want to show up as ourselves. So I agree with that, but it was interesting to see an article that
Right.
justified that information.
Mhm.
Now, in all the roles you've had and all the experience you've had, Erin, what are some leadership lessons that you have learned over the years?
I think one of the big ones is to honestly admit when we don't know something. And to try not to BS our way out of situations, because people will sense when you're kind of giving them a political response. So being honest with people when you don't know what the answer is, or being honest with your feedback. And I also think that being honest with our mistakes is a huge leadership lesson. Too often, leaders aren't willing to share openly that they made a mistake. And when that happens, I think levels of trust really plummet and perceptions of credibility go down. And mistakes are okay. Mistakes are part of being human and part of leadership. So it's not that we shouldn't be making a mistake. It's that when we do make a mistake, that we use it as an opportunity to grow and to learn and to be humble about that mistake and be honest about it.
And I think people appreciate imperfection in their leaders.
Right.
Because none of us are perfect. But if somebody's able to own that, then they become more authentic.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
okay. That's okay. And I think we've all shifted that way, that we've cut some of those not barriers, but we've allowed ourselves to just show up sometimes and say, it's okay, I made a mistake, or I apologize for that mistake if apologies are appropriate, because they're not always appropriate.
Right.
But just to own up to your actions.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not these perfect leaders who don't ever do anything wrong. Or if we do come across that way, perhaps you're not going to relate as well.
Right. And when you think about the most trusted relationships that you have in your life, professionally and personally, you probably have experienced a sense of that other person's vulnerability. You probably don't trust someone that has never exposed a little bit about their vulnerability to you. And so I think that that's part of leading with authenticity, is being appropriately vulnerable in the workplace.
I'm glad you said that, because those two terms work very well together. That you can't be authentic if you show no vulnerability.
Right, right.
Now, I'm sure you've made some mistakes over the years. We don't want to just focus on negatives, but we like to know when people have mistakes, how they came out of it, how they recovered. Do you have any examples of that, Erin?
I have a ton of them.
We all make mistakes.
I make a ton of mistakes on a daily basis, but there's one in particular that really stands out to me because it really was a career-defining moment. And this was when I was with Great Place to Work, and I was promoted into the vice president of our international operations. And I negotiated a contract with an organization in Asia, and it cost the organization an obscene amount of money. I chose the wrong partner for us. I trusted them, and I was a little naive, and I was also not as experienced back then. And when I say obscene, I mean truly obscene amount of money. And so I went into our CEO and I tendered my resignation because I said, I'm so sorry that I made this mistake. You trusted me to lead successfully, and I didn't in this particular case. And he pushed the resignation letter back across the table and he said, I don't accept this. We just invested so much money in your growth and development that you're going to stick around, because we want you to honor that mistake and ensure that you lead your team to make sure that we never make that type of mistake again. And I was so overwhelmed by that concept of thinking, reframing failures, and really learning from them, because when we reflect back on our careers, we probably learn a lot more from our mistakes than from our successes.
And isn't that true about life in general?
Right,
If
absolutely.
we always win, we never learn how to deal with adversity.
Right.
That always brings in, because I always tend to bring sports in some way, but that is true. The people who win all the time, they don't know what it's like when they finally lose. What
Right.
happens? How do they deal with that?
Right.
So that's a great example. And it's also a great example of the person that you said when you submitted your resignation, what a wonderful leader that person was to approach it that way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a great story. Erin, can you share with us any decisions that you've had to make as a leader that required a significant amount of courage?
I think probably the biggest decision that I made as a leader, that was one of the scariest, was when I was with Union Square Hospitality Group, and we eliminated tipping in our restaurants so that we could completely rework our organization internally, and to be able to compensate our people in a more professional and thoughtful way, to be able to financially recognize them for their contributions, rather than having our guests determine how to recognize and financially reward our people. That was a huge decision that our organization made, and it was done thoughtfully and after a tremendous amount of analysis, but it had never been done before. And so it really required our organizational fortitude and even my own personal courage to lead that effort.
How did it work out?
Well, it worked out for several years. It was a challenging process, because we were not only changing our compensation for our team members, but our guests needed to get more comfortable with it. So it was a much longer process to roll it out. We eventually rolled it out across all of our different businesses, and then COVID hit. And when we reopened our businesses, we reverted back to the prior way, in large part because because our people hadn't been working for so long. And when our guests came back into the restaurants, they wanted to take care of our people. And so we went back to the tipping model after COVID.
That's interesting. So those times definitely influenced, especially those people who were out of work for so long.
Absolutely.
You don't want to have a ceiling for what
No.
they're making. Let people appreciate them and show their appreciation.
Right.
That's very interesting. And I know in other countries, tipping isn't as important as it is in the United States. So it's interesting just to see the different cultures and how they approach rewarding people or acknowledging people. Erin, I always ask this question of my guests, and because of course this is about how to speak, sound, and look like a leader. And after all these interviews, it's also how to act like a leader. What do you see as an essential skill to speak, sound, and look like a leader?
Active listening, I think, is probably one of the most important skills, and demonstrating curiosity in your active listening to understand who you are speaking to, what their unique needs are, and how you might be able to engage with that other human being in a more connected way. Active listening for sure.
And just so you know, that's another one of those traits that showed up on the list that wasn't there.
Okay. You'll have to send me this article.
I will share that article, and you are very current. Yours is more not from reading an article, but from your expansive experience that you've had working in the world of leadership. And Erin, how can people get in touch with you?
They can reach out to me through my email, which is EMORAN at towson.edu or on LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn is a great place, and that's where this interview is being aired.
Right.
So it's a wonderful way to reach out to both you and to me as well. And Erin, thank you so much to take time on this busy schedule that you have to share your insight about leadership. And this is towards the end of my leadership series. And when I met you, I couldn't think of a better person to talk about leadership than the executive director of the Dr. Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute. So thanks for sharing your insights with me today.
Thank
And
you so much for having me, Linda. I really appreciate it.
I do. And I look forward to more conversations like this.
So do I.